So I'm delighted to be joined this evening by two podcasters in the Irish scene that have been going for way, way longer than I have, and even than the Climate Ambassador podcast has. So first we have Cara Carney of the Book of Leaves podcast. It takes an interview format, and Cara has been going since April. How far back is it, Cara? Let me see.
2019, I think.
19. Amazing.
Yeah.
So you are the OG of the podcasting panel here. It's an award-winning podcast, as I mentioned, and you've talked to activists and innovators and all sorts of people. And then we're also joined by Dara Wynne, one of the hosts of the Climate Alarm Clock. It's a weekly Irish climate news podcast that has kind of changed format over the years. And at the moment, in its current iteration, it's very much focused just on the news and kind of breaking down that kind of things. But in the past, there are other, like almost 100 episodes in the back catalogue where they do kind of helpful explainers of science and policy. And Dara, that podcast has been going since October 2021 as well. So um, on the road quite a while as well. And if you're not aware as well, then I'm the host of the Climate Ambassador podcast, which was started by one of our climate ambassadors as their one of their climate actions back in maybe 2020, I think, possibly even longer. And we're now in the fourth season, so I've just about to wrap on the fourth season. Our last episode, episode 10, is coming out next Monday. But yeah, there's a big back catalogue of those as well. So just I'll share some links for Cara and Dara's podcast in a little while, but I'd love to hear from you guys. So Cara, can you tell us a bit about where your podcasting journey started and what got you into this kind of thing?
Yeah. So I guess in 2019, that was the green wave kind of rising with Greta Thunberg and start of Extinction Rebellion and stuff like that. Um, so I was listening to an Australian podcast where the guy interviewed the person behind those coconut bowls. If you ever see the recycled coconut husks that have been turned into bowls.
Yeah.
And he was basically talking about how that business started. And I remember I was walking home. I was doing like a course at the time, and I was walking along the River Liffey, about to cross over O'Connell Bridge. And I remember just, I don't know if it was looking at the river or listening to what the guy was saying about these romantic coconut bowls. But I was like, wouldn't it be so good if there was a podcast or something in Ireland that platformed the positive things people were doing here? And because I was a fan of Blind Boys podcast, he's just one man with one mic. I was like, I'll do it. No one else is doing it, so I'll do it. I had no experience. I'm an actor by trade. I'm a tour guide, so I've the gift of the gab, but not exactly editing or anything like that. So I literally just started, and I have been too stubborn to give up. So there's now a lot of episodes. But that's how it started. Yeah.
And we're very glad that you haven't given up. That's amazing. Really nice to hear that kind of inspiration. And it is like, because people have those kind of ideas all the time, but more often than not, we don't act on them. But so great to hear that it was just that's the genesis of it. And Dara, then, what's your story? What's your background and how you got into this?
Yeah, so I suppose in terms of podcasting, a bit similar to Cara around the green wave end of 2018, 2019, I was thinking, what can I do? I want to do something. And so the first podcast that I ran was actually one called Carbon Neutral Lent, where myself and another friend tried to reduce our carbon emissions throughout Lent and sort of documented our experience. So that was a really steep learning curve. Like that, I'd never done any podcast and any recording. Like I remember um, sitting in front of a microphone and trying to say something and maybe taking 20 or 30 times to like get one sentence out or whatever. But so that was, yeah. So then from there, fast forward maybe a year or 2 years nearly, and I think in uh sort of September 2020, myself and a good friend of mine, Ellen Hegarty, who's actually a former climate ambassador, said that we do a podcast kind of asking if we could use COVID as a wake-up call to take action on climate change. So it was called the COVID Alarm Clock. And we had 7 episodes, and each episode had a different sort of area of focus. So one was, for example, politics, one was science, one was the economy, and then one was the media. And I remember kind of having a bit of a realization when we were doing the media episode that like COVID coverage was everywhere. you know, whether you wanted to or not, you knew everything about social distancing and masking up and you know, R numbers and all this kind of stuff because it was just everywhere. Whereas with climate change, you actually had to go out of your way to get the climate news, which is you know, it takes a certain kind of
Yeah.
person to go out of your way to look at this really terrible news. So from there, I kind of had the idea, well, if we could make a climate news podcast where people, rather than doom scrolling, could just tune into us every week, then that would be a really good thing to do. So we started that 3 years ago last week, actually. And as you mentioned, Dahi, it was a very different format at the start. We had lots of different features and loads of collaboration. So Cara actually did a little mini book of leaves as part of our first season.
Yeah.
Now it's just a news roundup where myself and my two co-hosts basically get online and have a rant about the climate news. So I
It's
think the
so
listeners get
cathartic.
yeah,
It's
the
amazing.
listeners get something out of it, I think, but we definitely get something out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you managed to keep it light as well, which is so important. But just to go back to the thought of the parallels with the pandemic and how that was such a big there had to be public buy-in to kind of solve that crisis and to stop it from getting any worse. And I think so many people were thinking, okay, look at all the amount of buy-in and cooperation we have from like the majority of society. So that's really great that that kind of was the kicking off point for the podcast. So good to hear that. So I guess, Dara, yours, would I be right in saying that the focus of the podcast then is the most current kind of developments in climate? Is that what your main goal is?
Yeah, so I suppose it's for us, it's for listeners to have an easy way of getting up to date with the latest climate news. Um, so we actually recorded an episode this morning, the first episode of our seventh season. That'll be going out tomorrow. So basically, we've looked at kind of the big news stories from the last couple of weeks and talked through them, tried to explain them in simple terms, and then kind of giving our honest, you know, emotional reaction to it. Because I think sometimes, you know, news coverage, it can be like very objective and sort of totally missing that emotional thing. And it, you know, if you're listening to a radio show, it might go from news about the economy to news about the climate to news about celebrities, and it's all in the same tone. Whereas, like some, you know, some stories you see or some headlines you hear, um, you do have a big emotional response and reaction. So we're trying to bring that this season as well. We're doing a news roundup every second week, and then we're doing what we're calling climate question episodes. So we're kind of trying to zero in on big climate questions that people might vaguely know stuff about, but not be too sure on the details. So we're doing one on like offsetting. What's the story with that? We're doing one on
Brilliant.
data centers. We're doing one on why is meat bad for the environment. So yeah, that's our format for this season, anyways.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I guess, Cara, then I mean, because we were chatting just before we started recording about Dara having recorded an episode, yes, this morning and it's going out tomorrow. I was saying that our turnaround is a lot slower. We have kind of, so far, we've had only 10 episodes in the year, and there's plenty of time to kind of between the record and the edit and to time them. What way does it end up working out for you with the Book of Leaves?
So I am meant to release an episode every second Monday. That's just the thing. Initially, when I started it, I was like, maybe I can get to do this weekly, but it's just too time consuming. Like I'm a one-woman show, so I record it, do the socials, and do all the editing myself. Just figured it out. So when the season starts, so I kind of hibernate with the season. So from January to March, I give myself pretty much that time off.
Yeah,
And then I do 20 episodes then between April and December. And when the season begins, I'm nice and like organized in advance. I might have the all the episode and the show notes ready. I could record it like a month before and have it ready to go a few days before. But the longer into the season it goes, my ADHD brain kicks in and goes, "You can do this last minute." So there has been two episodes this season where I edited the whole thing on the Monday it was meant to go out and then put it out
yeah,
that night, record the intro and show the
yeah.
notes and everything. And there was one day where I recorded it in the morning and put it out that night because I had usually I build up interviews and then I'll put
Yeah,
them out. I try to space out topics so you don't get like two
great.
fashion ones in a row.
Yeah,
But this time I had just was like, I had a interview scheduled, but they had to cancel. So I was like, oh my God, I've no episode for Monday. And thankfully they were free to record Monday morning. And I just did the whole day was
wow.
very last minute. So yeah, I end up chasing my tail a bit then. It's
Yeah,
it's usually always out on time, except for 2 weeks ago, but I jet lagged, so I'm
yeah,
gonna
yeah, yeah.
have a way with that.
And I guess it kind of fits in with your work life as well. Then, in that would you be project based as an actor or freelance, or what way does that work out?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I work obviously when you work as an artist and whatever your art form is, so mine is acting and recently getting into writing. There's lots of in between gigs.
yeah,
So last year I had like 6 months of working nonstop, and this year has been a lot quieter. So the other jobs that I do, I work in a theater, and I also kind of work sometimes as a tour guide,
yeah,
and I do a lot of kind of corporate acting work as well. And it just means that my every week to week is completely different. I work a lot of evenings, I work a lot of weekends. Um, but that suits me. I couldn't do 9 to 5. I don't think. Not for me. So yeah,
yeah.
very sporadic.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And but it's great that you do make it work like that. It does suit with podcasting and like I guess side hustle or side projects like that. In terms of then I guess we all have kind of different angles. Our the Climate Ambassador podcast, we try climate literacy is like a big thing that we're trying to do. And we would go into more depth on kind of sometimes on science or solutions and stuff. Dara's obviously is on news, and then Cara, would you say yours is? I mean, like, there's such a variety and diversity of guests that you have onto the podcast. What would you say would be like the main goal of the Book of Leaves podcast? Is it to reach a new audience or to destigmatize certain topics, or what would you have one overarching goal?
It's probably to inspire action. Raising
Yeah,
awareness is like a huge part of I guess all of ours, and just climate action in general. The more people know, the more action people can take, hopefully. But mine is to inspire action, and I do that by trying to make it relatable. So I'll have a mixture of experts. So, for example, I think it was your last episode was with Jerry McGovern, who
yeah,
is a genius when it comes to like data,
that's right.
energy
Yeah,
usage, and
yeah.
e-waste. So I interviewed him, and it was bloody brilliant because the information he had was just phenomenal. And then the whole
Mm,
idea is we can take a leaf out of the guest book. So whatever
yeah,
suggestions or whatever way they're living, we can then start, we can take on
exactly.
whatever
Yeah,
we like from that chat. So that's where the name came from. But it's also really important to me to interview people who are not activists. They could just be parents that are trying cloth nappies. They could be just general
mm,
kind of activists who go to protests that are students or whatever. And I do that because I really want to make sure that the information is accessible and that anyone can take action. You don't have to be an expert, to be doing something positive. My only niche is that it has to be located or related to Ireland. Like I've
okay.
had really, I don't know, Dara, if you ever get this, or maybe not even you. Sometimes I'll get emails of like, "Hi, we have this woman who wrote like an environmentally friendly book. Will you have her on your podcast?" And I'm like, you guys have just got some AI bot like sending it out to random podcasts to feature on them to do PR, and I'm like, no, sorry, it has to be Ireland or whatever. So I
Irish,
try,
yes.
everything is local. Yeah, it's all related to here. That's my one thing. But yeah, to inspire action is probably the main thing.
Great. Okay, so yeah, inspiring action, and that's like because climate is famously such a complex thing. It kind of touches all aspects of society in our lives, so it is kind of overwhelming and hard to know what way to frame it and to focus. So just Dara, I guess coming to you, what would be would you try and strike a balance then if you're talking about news in terms of uplifting stories and the cold hard kind of facts of it as well, or what way do you go about addressing that balance to keep people engaged?
Yeah, like it's something we wrestle with every week when we're doing an episode, to be honest. And I I could see Cara laughing there because there's probably some episodes where, where we haven't gotten the balance and and there's been really big, heavy news stories and we've just said, yeah, this is a really big, heavy, scary story. And it's
Yeah,
hard, you're always striking that balance. We do try to have a good news story and some actions that people can take at the end. But for example, the episode we recorded today, it was about that big WWF report from last week saying that we've lost 73% of our wildlife in the last 50 years, and from the EPA State of the Environment report, which looked at Ireland's environmental performance over the last 4 years. And
Mm.
spoiler alert, not great.
Yeah.
But we got on talking about those stories, but I think it's kind of our reaction sometimes is where the maybe more positive or uplifting or kind of dark humor side of it comes from.
Yeah.
I think it's really hard to strike the balance, because the whole reason our podcast exists is because the media are doing a terrible job when it comes to covering climate change. They're massively failing. I would say our state broadcaster, just RTE have a responsibility to be doing stuff on climate and the public service and making people aware of that, and they're not doing it. So we always have that in the back of our mind. And if you're just coming in with the kind of uplifting, happy stories, you might be missing some of the really important stories that, I think we all need to try and find that balance to engage with a little bit more. So yeah, it's always a challenge for us to get that balance right.
It's really nice to listen to the struggle, though. I guess that's why I'm smiling, because I think we all feel the struggle of like wanting to know the information, the facts of what's happening, but also looking for the positive. And you guys, like, your sarcasm and your no, we couldn't find any good news this week. Like, even the way you deliver it, it's very, maybe I'm the only person who finds it entertaining or cathartic, but I do. It's just so comforting. I love it.
Yeah, that's what we get from a lot of our listeners. Is obviously when we started the podcast, we wanted to, break through the climate bubble and whatever. But it's
Yeah.
now people really engaged in climate change that tune in, and their feelings are kind of reflected in the way we react to the story. And I think that's kind of the power of
Mm.
what we do, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the humor is a really effective tool for I've like enjoyed some of that in the episodes where it is the dark humor. I think does keep people on board. It just toes the line where people are still engaged and kind of managing to kind of see the Schadenfreude the side of it. Um, so I guess then in terms of the getting guests on, I don't know, Dara, if you're getting many guests on with your current season. You have had guests on in the past. That was where I first heard about is it Tig from Cork? I've forgotten his surname.
Yeah, Ty Kiki. So we've gone through a few iterations. So we would have had guests on regularly. It was kind of a magazine format. So we'd round up the news. We'd have had features from people like Cara and Birdwatch Ireland, Irish Doctors for the Environment, and a few
Yeah.
more, and then interviews with climate journalists. Then we had a season where we tried to do the news roundup with people who weren't necessarily climate literate. So Ty Hickey came on, and Andrea
Mhm.
Horan, and
Yeah.
a couple more people. And then we'll occasionally do special episodes where we get people on, but most of the time it's just myself and my co-hosts, Anna Pringle and Kira Daly, who joined after our second season. And she came very much from not knowing too much about climate. And she
Yeah.
came to kind of ask maybe the questions some people would be afraid to ask, and that has worked really well. She kind of knows a lot about climate now, so she's nearly putting herself out of a job because she really gets it now. And then we also occasionally will have other people on. So Tom Spencer, who runs a website called the Irish EVs, has been filling in for us quite a lot in the last few seasons when one of us hasn't been around.
Yeah. Cara, then a question for you about in terms of when you're reading about a guest that you're going to get on, and you want to kind of get the I guess the intimacy or the naturalness of a real conversation. It's been my experience in this first season that I've been doing where I've kind of almost over prepared, and it takes some of the kind of spontaneity out of the conversation. What is your approach to researching someone and trying to strike that balance?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, I've developed a bit of a format now, probably similar the last two seasons. It's kind of settled into, I know the questions I
Yeah.
want to ask. So I love just getting to know how people were inspired to take climate action in the first place. Because I think if people hear, oh, a documentary inspired me, or I saw my colleague doing this and it inspired me to do that, then I like sharing those stories because it reinforces the fact that we all have a ripple effect.
Yeah.
You never know what will inspire someone to take action. And then after we get to know them, why they do what it is they do. So if it's, for example, I'm going to have a guy coming up in an episode soon who set up a mattress recycling company. He's a traveler and he also employs like local travelers because there's a big
Brilliant.
employment issue in the traveler community, where
Amazing.
they won't be employed. So there's this thriving business out recycling mattresses, and he like explains the problem of, say, the amount of mattresses and what they're made of, but all of the good materials that are not being reused, and then how they recycle them and what they get turned into and stuff like that.
Mm.
So it's kind of, we then look at the problem and then look at the solutions and then any other tips they might have. And then a recent question I've added is then just imagining the future as they want it to work out. So using that kind of basic format, I kind of apply that to all of the guests. So if they're
Yeah.
a general activist, or if I know that they're really proficient in, say, growing food, it'll be the same kind of questions that I'll ask. I'll have a look at their website and see if there's anything that they do that I didn't know about, or their
Yeah.
socials and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Some people don't want questions sent to them. Some, like, very, very few now, but
Yeah.
some people are like, no, let's just go with the flow. Otherwise, they'll over prepare. So
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
only have maybe 8 to 10 questions max, I've actually found sometimes guests can over prepare. And like sometimes they might have notes and then they'll start reading the notes, and I'll say, put the note, like, cause I
Yeah.
edit every episode, I'll say it's okay, put the notes down, and like, you
Yeah.
know it. Let's just have a free flowing chat
Brilliant.
here. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of how it's been rolling the last while.
And that's where your experience comes in, and like it kind of, I think it really does show, and even the difference if you can be in person versus remote, because I've done only one in-person interview, and just someone remarked on the how much more kind of spontaneous and kind of natural it sounded compared to the online ones.
Yeah.
And I guess you're more able to read visual cues and body language and stuff, and respond to stuff in a more natural way. So do you I guess we'll come on to maybe this, you can answer this in the next question, just in terms of the kind of equipment and the recording and editing software, and whether you do remote or in person. What way has that changed for you over time, and what's your current setup in terms of equipment and that, Cara?
Yeah, so it's definitely changed over time. And as I was saying to you before at the start, like if someone was to start this podcast in episode one, like God love you, because the sound definitely goes on a journey, and I feel
Yeah.
like I'm learning with the sound quality for sure. If people are interested in starting their own podcast, the mics that are available now are so much more. There's so much more of them available because nearly everyone is doing podcasting. Because I like to have the option to travel to people to record in person, I
Yeah.
got the Rode wireless. Now I invested in the Rode wireless mics, which are the little
Cool.
tiny. You'll see these in like Instagram videos the whole time.
Oh
These
yeah.
little tiny things. There's two of them because I cannot. I get really stressed if I'm recording with two microphones separately because I don't know what I'm doing. But this records with the two microphones all built in, so I don't need to worry about it. So this is really handy if I'm traveling somewhere. Like years ago, I went to Seal Rescue Ireland
Hmm.
to record a
Yeah.
podcast because I was like, obviously, I want to see the seals in person, so let's just do that. And I had
Yeah.
to like be near a plug for my laptop and have a table to put the microphone clamp on, so it was a bit more messy. So I use
Yeah.
the Rode ones now, and but if someone wants to start and doesn't have a lot of money, the Yeti microphone it can be good because you just put it on the table and it can record like all sides, so you don't need to buy multiple microphones if people aren't like experienced in
Yeah.
it. Audacity is a free editing software. I don't
Okay.
have a Mac,
Yeah.
so I think GarageBand is what other people you might use, and then
Right.
yeah, hosting platforms and stuff I can talk about later, but the that microphone, and then if I'm recording at home on my laptop, I use an ATR 2100 it's called. But in regards to, I try to record in person and I have learned the quieter and damper the room, the better. So the libraries, your local library will sometimes have a recording booth. The
Oh,
one in
wow.
Ballyfermot has two really good sound booths. One of them is like set up for kind of musicians, but the one in the ILAC Centre
Amazing.
in
Yeah.
Dublin City Centre is where I've started recording now, because less than a year ago they put a little booth in there that has two Shure microphones already set up and an interface. You just plug it into your own laptop and it records in there. So I'm so happy with that because it's just so much easier than traveling out to Ballyfermot. So yeah,
What a
definitely
good
check out
result.
your local libraries. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good plug as well. How about yourselves and Dara? So you're more than a one woman show, a one person show. You've got someone on your team who's a sound producer. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, really lucky. So when I started off doing Carbon Neutral Lent and even the first season of the Climate Alarm Clock, I was doing a lot of the recording and editing myself. So I like Cara, I'd use Audacity. It's a free program. It's great for editing. Once you get into it, I the first thing I bought was this handheld Zoom that you can plug two microphones into. I used to play a bit of music, so I had some um microphones and stuff from that, so I was able to plug them into that. Um, we when we first did the COVID alarm clock, that was during social distancing, so we were online. Um, the first season of the climate alarm clock was in person, and then we moved that online as well. So I suppose one thing we do on that online format is we all record our own audio separately, and then we send it over to Rob,
Mm.
our excellent sound producer. So that kind of gives us better quality than if we were just recording
Yeah.
a Zoom call or a phone call. Um, and I think Anna uses a similar setup to me, and Kira uses a mic that plugs straight into her laptop. She records on Audacity and then sends it over to Rob. So yeah,
Okay.
I'd echo what Cara said about, having a nice quiet room. When we did the COVID alarm clock, I used to go into a spare bedroom in the house at the time and put a mattress up on the table in front of me. It was a whole process, and Ellen recorded under a sleeper bunk bed in her son's room, so it was gas.
Yeah.
Um, but but yeah, I think the thing about the online as well that you said about that, about not reading cues and stuff, that's one thing where I think it suits us to have, the three of us on hosting every week.
Yeah.
We get better at that. We get better at that kind of online interaction, and you develop systems, but it does take practice to remember that, and allowing an extra second for people to respond, and
Yeah.
um not getting annoyed if someone cuts over you because
Yeah.
because of the time lag, so yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. That yeah, you have a rapport, so you kind of get to know each other, and you understand the medium. So you learn not to take things personally if someone yeah cuts across you in the interest of keeping it sounding natural and that kind of thing. And just you mentioned Audacity. We would use so I just on the Time and Ambassador podcast we have a sound producer and we use a production company. So we have the luxury of just sending the link to our guest and having a call with them, but with the producer present online. So I don't. A lot of this stuff is new information to me. We would use Riverside, which is where we record online, and then the producer edits. But is Audacity a similar thing where you can record online, or is it just editing? What would that
No,
be? Yeah,
yeah, that's just editing.
just
I've started
editing.
using Riverside recently though for remote. I
Okay.
used something, oh my God, the name escapes me. Before that, something similar, only it was just more expensive. Whereas
Yeah.
Riverside, I try
Yeah.
like there's a 2 hour free option, and yeah,
Gotcha.
that's useful. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And how about yourself then, Darren? What would your online platform be?
So we would just use Zoom or Teams or
All
Google
right.
Meet,
Yeah.
and then we all record ourselves
Yeah.
individually. So I would record straight onto this,
Interesting. Yeah.
and Kira would record on Audacity, and then send that over to Rob. And I think he uses Audacity. Um,
It
yeah,
sounds really
which
good
is
though, because because there's, even when you use Riverside, even though it's set up for podcasts, you're always going to lose a tiny bit of audio quality.
Mm.
Whereas the climate alarm clock, like you guys just sound like you're all in the room together because
the local
It's you,
recording.
you like you're recording straight into the
Yeah.
microphones like so.
And we're also very lucky that like it's Rob, it's a friend of mine who is a
Woo
sound
Rob!
engineer, and
Yeah.
yeah, he's amazing, he's brilliant. But he knows how to change like, you know, like levels and stuff
Yeah.
on treble and bass
Yeah.
on people's voice, and how to cut out the hissing and stuff. That's next level sound editing. So
Do you ever give him messages, leave him messages in the record and be like, "Hey Rob, as you're editing this,
so
please take out these fart
he
noises
will
or whatever."
he usually comes on the call with us now,
Okay.
because it makes it quicker for him. But you will notice there's always usually an Easter egg at the end of our episodes where he'll just
Oh,
get a little, something that someone said off mic, or like a little mistake. So if you stay to the very end of the episode,
great.
that's where Rob gets to have his fun. He'll put in like one of us saying something stupid at the end. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
I
That's
love
a
that.
good tip. So just back to then, I guess the heaviness of the topic, and it's number one thing to think about, balancing the uplifting stories with the kind of the cold hard facts of the challenge that we're facing. In terms of managing climate anxiety, then I guess firstly in terms of your own climate anxiety, because we're researching these things and reading about them and then having to communicate about them and talk about them so much. Cara, how would you go about looking after yourself basically from dealing with that on such a regular basis?
Reading the book Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet by Thich Nhat Hanh was so helpful. I've
Yeah.
experienced burnout once and
Yeah.
it was awful. Like, I had been doing not just the podcast, but just like protest activism and then,
Yeah.
trying to keep your career going while like what you want to be doing creatively, but then
Mm.
also your jobs that pay the bills and then family stuff or whatever's happening
Yeah.
like, oh, burnout was just awful. So I never wanted to feel that again. I
Mm.
found like time in nature helps. And now I live in the middle of Dublin. So uh even there's like a little canal walk kind of near me. Even if I just go out there and sit for a few minutes, like the things that
Yeah.
they talk about in Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet, like the meditation practices, when I am disciplined enough to do them, I find so helpful. And then also just finding a group. So
Yeah.
like Extinction Rebellion have been a lot quieter since COVID, because obviously it was a mass mobilization movement, and then COVID took the wind out of everyone's sails. But they still kind of meet every single Wednesday in Dublin and create art together for
Great.
kind of small little actions, small little protests or whatever.
Yeah.
And I check in with them every now and again, and that's it's just one little group, one of the many groups like
Yeah.
that you can find. So I think finding a group is so helpful, but also like meditation, time in nature. I'm not a sea swimmer. I'm not, but I'm sure it does help. I hate cold water, so I can't do it. But there's lots of things that you can do. And I also just switch off. I also let
Yeah.
myself just switch off and watch Grey's Anatomy or read like
Great.
a fiction book because I just fill my mind with nonfiction the whole time. And that has to be allowed. You need to fill your cup to be able to take action. You can't pour from an empty cup, as they say.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, couldn't agree more. That's so important just to allow ourselves to switch off. And yeah, I fully agree with that. Reading fiction and kind of escapism, whether that's through movies or games or whatever, is very important. Dara, then any would you echo a lot of what Cara said, or have you got different techniques for managing that?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that Cara said for sure, like definitely for me, getting out into nature
Yeah.
um makes makes a huge difference. I will notice if I haven't done it. Also, recently I've been a lot more conscious of my kind of phone use, that sometimes if you're reading heavy stories or if we're doing research for an episode, it's really easy to just end up on the laptop or phone for ages, kind of doom scrolling. So I've been a lot more regimented about when to use that for climate and other things. That makes a big difference. But I suppose like yeah, for me, um, there was a great climate psychology conference on in Dublin last year, about this time last year, and Caroline Hickman, a climate psychologist, was there, and she was talking about climate anxiety, and she said, if you're anxious about climate, that's because you care, and be proud that you care. Climate anxiety is a really rational thing, and I think that reframing for me was amazing. Be proud that you care. Um,
Nice.
and then there's a real for me there's a real balance. Obviously, having people that you can talk to about it and having a group that you can do something with. Um, and like I find doing the podcast is great because we get to go on and talk about the stories and actually, properly engage with them and then kind of park it. Um,
Yeah.
and that makes a huge difference. Like I was saying, the two stories we were covering today were really heavy.
Yeah.
We got in there and we talked about it and we were, all saying, yeah, this is this is terrible. But we got it out and we processed it um and uh and we felt the better for it. But there's always a balance to be struck with that, with how much you take in.
Yeah.
And definitely, yeah, having time to just switch off and forget about it is really important as well.
And as Cara was saying earlier, that's cathartic for the listener as well, and that really comes across very well. That it's giving voice to stuff that maybe people are feeling but aren't articulating, and kind of help them to work through what the news means or whatever as well. So just because it's gonna get into you somehow, whether you're consciously processing it
Yeah,
or not, you're going to be aware of the even just reading a headline sometimes is enough to kind of give you a sense of dread. So to have someone kind of work it out and process it there for you, and
ye-
in a kind of a safe space that is created in the podcast. Like if people are regular listeners to something, it can be feel like almost a coming home to kind of something where it's okay to have those kind of darker feelings.
yeah, for sure. And I think the last thing I'll say on this as well is that any research that's done finds that it's somewhere between 70 and 85% at any given time when the surveys are done. 70 to 85% of people in Ireland are worried about climate change. So it's
Yeah,
this thing loads of people are feeling. No one's really talking about it. So I think being aware that, if you are worried about climate change, you're in the majority. Most other people are as well. And for me, even just being aware of that, um, and knowing that if I talk about it, other people, they might not have articulated it themselves, but they can definitely identify with it and they might be glad that you're the one that brought it up. Sometimes they're not, but they might be.
Not again, Dara, please. Let me enjoy my dinner in peace. No.
and then I guess a related thing in terms of you mentioned being on your phone, Dara, and then kind of trying to take a break from that. Is it almost an inevitable part of promoting podcasts that you would be sharing stuff on social media? And how do you manage your social media use for promoting it, or even getting into the analytics, looking at who's listening to your podcast and where? Is that something, well, like what way do you guys promote your podcast, and how do you manage that balance? Cara, maybe we'll come to you first.
Um, so I mainly use Instagram, and I think social media is really important. I did remember doing some research for a podcast and workshop, and the biggest way people actually discover podcasts is by word of mouth.
Right.
So people sharing podcasts online and stuff like that is so, so helpful. And even if I think to
Mm,
the podcasts that I've listened to, like the ones that I listen to, like religiously,
yeah,
were nearly always recommended by word of mouth. And then second to that, I think was social media or algorithm or something like that. So it is,
yeah,
social media is fortunately a huge part of it.
yeah,
Obviously, social media can be such it's a very addictive, it's a very depressing place to be sometimes.
yeah.
But I have curated a very nice feed. Like the people that I follow on social media are like I learn off them,
Great. Yeah,
and the information that I give a lot of the time is kind of telling my own kind of stories, but also sharing things that I've learned as well. And initially, it was just kind of like it's not just about so Book of Leaves podcast is on
yeah,
Instagram, but it's not just about the guests that I have.
yeah,
I'm now doing a format where I'll share a snippet of like a reel of the audio of every episode, but I'll also do posts in between of events like this or
yeah.
things that I've done that month or something, a product that I found that's been really helpful. And just like I'm trying to use that as just a normal base to kind of to raise awareness of other things that might not be on the podcast, but I want to plug anyway. Or it's a really good way of plugging the things that aren't related to Ireland
Yeah.
necessarily. Like there's like a makeup recycling place business in the UK that you can ship your old eyeshadow and blush palettes to, and they turn them into paint. So I made a reel about that because I
Cool.
was like, more people want to know about this. So
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of use it to just raise awareness of everything and try to be solution orientated and stuff.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think it's really important about curating your feed, as you mentioned, that's that to remember that you do have control over what can feel like the onslaught of information. And it's
Yeah.
unfortunate since there's now the for you or the following that the default is a for you feed and that's kind of knows your your patterns and the
Mm.
stuff that you'll watch longest. So if you can manage to kind of just look at what you want to look at and take control over that, at least that can kind of filter out a lot of the stuff that can be more harmful or damaging. What would you use then, Dara, for the climate alarm clock for promoting it?
Yeah, it's the same. Like we've an Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook page.
Yeah.
Once again, I think we're lucky in that because there's kind of three of us involved in hosting that, you know, generally speaking, one of us will be more engaged with the socials at any given time. Last season, none of us were, and we got through the whole season. And so I met a few people at different times. They're like, "When's the new season starting back up?" I was like, "It started a month ago," um, because it's hard. Like it's
Yeah.
hard to stay on top of that.
Yeah.
But I would echo what Cara said about like word of mouth is, yeah, has definitely helped. People that we would have bumped into that are listening to it, they're listening to it because someone else told them about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I found for us like we would share on Instagram on same as you've mentioned Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, um, and then even on the Climate Ambassador website. But I find when possible, if we can share a video clip, like a small video clip, can do quite well. They can even obviously get more views than an episode being listened to. And initially, when I saw that, like you get less than 10% of the listens from compared to what a view of an Instagram reel is, for example, it's still actually reaching people in a way. And I kind of, yeah, my manager pointed that I'd like to reframe it that way, that it's still actually improving climate literacy and people are seeing these conversations about climate change, that has impact in itself as well. So to kind of see it as additional in terms of, yeah, maybe reaching your audience as well. Um, so then in terms of
Yeah, that's so true.
your experiences of over the last few years of podcasting, would you have a favorite episode or a favorite moment that people could go back and listen to? Cara, maybe it'll come to you first.
There's so many. I've just released, I'm on episode 112 now, I think,
Wow.
which so there's so many now that I might even have forgotten about some.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone wants to listen to the interview that I did with Dara, that's episode 90, where you can find out about his story.
Yeah.
But there's some really like I don't know, it's so hard to pick one, but given the state of the world right now, episode 96 from last season with a woman called Naomi Mihia, who works with Polycrisis. So it's her job is basically in research and management around the effects of things like war and famine on communities. So given what's happening in Palestine, I wanted to have someone onto the podcast to kind of talk about the planetary impacts of war. A lot of people can say, well, these things are separate issues, but really climate justice involves everything. And Naomi was just so open and so honest. And it's not an easy topic to talk about, but it was one of the most helpful episodes that I've found in knowing how to kind of react and process and how to get through something when what is going on this planet we call home right now is not normal and is so abysmal. That episode really sticks out as one where the guest was just being so generous in her sharing of her experience, but also her knowledge of like how she deals with her work on a day-to-day basis, let alone, like climate change and everything there. So she's given us
Yeah.
tools and like how to function as a human being when you feel like you are going insane and looking at all of this stuff on social media all the time and the powers that be are not doing enough about it. So that's one that definitely sticks out. But then I also have like really my favorite ones are anything about animals. I
Yeah.
love like the seal rescue one that I did. I did one about owls recently, hedgehogs. I'm like, tell me everything there is to know. But it's really interesting because then some people are like, nah, give me the ones about trees or whatever. So, yeah, the one with Flossie, who was a beach cleaner. The
Flossie
funniest
Donnelly.
moment was probably, yeah, Flossie Donnelly was
Yeah.
probably in that. I asked her, what's the weirdest thing you ever found on a beach clean? And she was like, probably a wax strip full of hair. And I was like, no way, like a couple. She was like, there was like 50 of them, 50
Whoa.
giant, like big wax strips with long dark hair on them. And it's just 2 minutes of us laughing about this thing, So that's the enjoyable part of having a free
Yeah.
flowing conversation. You don't know where it's going to go.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Great. And what about yourself then, Dara? Any memorable moments from the climate alarm clock?
So, my co-host Kira actually did a countdown of our 10 most listened to episodes on socials there over the last few weeks. So
Okay.
you can have a look there to see one episode that has gone down really well is an episode with a psychologist called Owen Gallivan. It's called Why Are We Stuck? And it's exploring the psychology of climate change and climate action and inaction. So it's with Owen Gallivan and Katrina Kenny from Connecting Cabra and lots of other things. So Anna hosts that episode.
Great.
That's a brilliant listen. And then I'm a bit like you, Cara, with the animal stuff. I loved the feature Birdwatch Ireland did in our
Yeah.
first season. They did a bird of the week. Um, they did 6 of them, and it's just little 5 minute snippets and lovely.
Fantastic. Yes, beautiful. Yeah. And it is like that's so important that it's stuff that you personally enjoy as well. Like, I mean, it's one thing to think about what's like the most pertinent information for people at the time, but I think it has to be stuff that's enjoyable and that feeds you. And you mentioned filling your cup, Cara. If you can do both at the same time, there's something that you're passionate about and it gives you hope and inspiration. That's all the better if that can be as part of your podcast as well. Well, yeah, for in terms of the Climate Ambassador podcast, we have an amazing episode with Professor Catherine Hayhoe. She does just really good for framing climate change in a way that's really uplifting and gets you more thinking about the opportunities from it as well, rather than seeing it as just we're always losing things. That and also Sarah Jaquette Ray as well was another episode. These are both from previous seasons. But then yeah, like I think having actually done the interviews for this season as well, you do have kind of personal highlights as well, like meeting Manacon McGann and hearing about his whole story as a travel writer, and he's since had a great series about he's gone to Europe, but it's all by train and boat and stuff. So really nice to hear those kind of stories and to have those connections and stuff as touch points. Um, so thanks a million, guys. That's all we have time for, I'd say, in terms of questions from you guys. But if we could open it up to the floor now, if anyone has any more questions, I think there was one there from Raquel Gerardo. What's the recommendation for a young person starting a podcast? You mentioned about what equipment would they need. We covered a bit on equipment, but have you guys got any other advice for where to start starting off on a podcast?
I think what you said there, Dahi, about it being something that you're passionate about and that you care about.
Yeah,
I think you have to be getting something from it yourself,
yeah,
like that, not to be doing it for listeners or for this kind of imaginary audience. So yeah, if you're doing it, make sure it's something that you're really passionate about and that you really, really care about.
yeah.
In
Great
terms of
advice.
where to start, like um there's loads of different, there's loads of different skills involved, like obviously the interviewing side of it, the recording, editing side. So probably start small, like start with aiming to put out little short
Yeah,
episodes and like practice the editing if you're doing it yourself. Practice the interviewing and be really nice to yourself.
yeah.
Because it is a journey. I think, Cara, I don't know if that was on air or no, you mentioned it, but your sound quality has changed throughout the journey, and same with me. Yeah.
Getting a lend of recording equipment can be good as well. Like if you're not sure if it's gonna be something that you stick with, like reach out and see if anyone you know has a microphone. Definitely a microphone, like not your laptop or webcam. Like you kind of do want as good a sound as you can get, and then choose your niche because there's millions of podcasts out there. So kind of choose your niche and what makes it kind of unique. Um, and you'll need a podcast hosting platform. So like there's a couple of different ones you'll come across. This is the home of your podcast that sends it out to Spotify, Apple Podcast, things like that. Apple Podcast register as soon as possible because they take a couple of weeks for your episode to go live, for your show to go live on it. However, I found a trick that I think is still active to get a free podcast hosting platform. If you sign up to a Patreon account, so Patreon is like is where people can support you financially, but you don't even need to make it public. Just make an account on Patreon and then sign up to Acast through Patreon. They have this deal going right now where if you sign up through Patreon, you get your Acast
Okay.
hosting for free. So I'm currently using that because this is self-funded and I
Yeah.
actively don't advertise on it because I am an anti-capitalist person, so I don't want to advertise. So it's completely self-funded. I try to
Good on you.
there's some people on my Patreon which is really great. But yeah, that's a trick that I found. So sign up to Patreon and then get a free Acast thing because you have to pay for every single other platform. Even if it's small as €9 a month, you still have to pay for it. But I think that one still works.
That's great tip. Great to know that. And yeah, and again, just it is so impressive that it is self-funded and it is a one person show. It's so impressive, Gara. Someone then followed up in terms of resources along the lines of the basic how to podcast, like a podcast for dummies. Have you come across any interesting sources for that kind of information?
YouTube, honest to
Yeah.
God, like I learned everything from YouTube like say you might use GarageBand instead of Audacity, so look up the YouTube videos for editing a podcast on Audacity, like depending on the podcast hosting platform, like YouTube videos are what taught me. You can feel free to reach out to me on Book of Leaves, Instagram or whatever. Like I answer questions about podcasting quite a lot, so you can do that. Not that I know everything at all, but I'll even point you to other resources. But YouTube is the best one, I think.
Good on you. Yeah.
Yeah, I've nothing much to
I don't
add.
know if Dara
Nothing
has
much
any
to
other.
add on that. I think yeah, I think just being nice to yourself as well when you're doing it, and
Yeah.
being aware that it's a journey and learning as you go. And just get stuck in.
Trial and error. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Great tips, guys. So that's a nice message there from Moira. She wants to raise awareness, but she won't be doing it on social media. She's suggesting creative writing workshops using prompts and songs, rituals, poetry, and whatever else occurs. And thanks for the heart that you bring. That's very nice. Thanks for that message, Moira. So have you any last words to say, guys? Or I don't think there's any more questions there, but I'd like to just thank you both so much for joining us. This is my first time meeting both of you, so it's really nice to meet and to chat and to share about the experience of putting together a podcast. Yeah, thanks a million, both of you.
Oh, thanks for having us, and thank you guys for being here, and good luck in your podcasting
Yeah, thanks a
journey.
million. Great to meet you, Dahi. And yeah, there was a while where there was a real Irish climate podcast community. There was ourselves and Irish Doctors for Environment, and
Yeah,
I think Birdwatch Ireland and Cara. We used to have it. I think 4 days of the week there'd be an episode coming out from one of us. So it's good to be getting the
Yeah, yeah.
Irish climate podcast gang back together.
great
Yeah,
stuff.
there's a new one actually I just discovered today called Beneath the Canopy, run by two forest bathers in Wicklow. They're only on like episode 4, something like that. So
Cool.
yeah, there's still some turning the soil. There's a good few. We're turning the earth, I think it's called. So yeah, there's always room for more because we need
Yeah,
loads of different angles and experiences.
that reminds me as well. There's a current climate ambassador. Well, we had one last year was Ecomomics, about two mothers sharing their experience of kind of managing a family and trying to balance yeah their environmental values as well. But also this season we have a lovely one called The Waters and the Wild. And it's all actually filmed on a river. It's a woman who one of our climate ambassadors who's spending time on and around the river that she grew up near, and she learned to swim in it and everything. And it's a lovely, very slow paced and really kind of high sound production one. So that's The Waters and the Wild, definitely worth checking out as well. All right, I think we leave it there. So, folks, thanks for everyone for tuning in, and thanks, Cara and Dara, for your time as well. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.